As you all know that the theme of the entire program is the legacy of Abraham. The reason we have selected this topic and this theme is because some of you may know that recently we just finished, or we went through a month, which was the final month of the Islamic lunar calendar. And this is the month which actually represents the actions where we, as Muslims, we imitate and we remember Prophet Ibraheem in that particular month. Just 2 days ago, we started a new Islamic lunar calendar year. So we are in the beginning stages once again of our calendar. Before we do get started, actually, and the subject of Abraham is quite broad. There's so much that you can mention, and there's so much that we can learn from Abraham, of course. However, before we get to Abraham, I want to actually target the subject from a very broad angle and very broad perspective. The very first thing is that I want to share with you that according to Islamic faith, there are many things that we have to first believe in order to consider, for any person to be considered as a Muslim. As you can see, the very first thing you see is the fundamentals of faith. And in the fundamentals of faith, every Muslim must believe in the oneness of God. He must believe in all the angels, especially there are a lot of angels that are mentioned in the Quran and the prophetic traditions, which are also mentioned in the Bible and in the Torah. For example, Angel Gabriel. He's also mentioned in Islamic literature, in Islamic books, just like he's mentioned in other holy scriptures. In the same exact way, as Muslims, we have to also believe that all the other books that were revealed, they were revealed from God. Whether it was the Psalms that was revealed to David, whether it was the Bible that was revealed to Jesus, we have to also believe that the Torah was revealed to Moses, and like the Quran was revealed to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. In the same exact way, Islam, like other religions such as Judaism and Christianity, we believe in all the other prophets. And I'm going to share with you a whole list of those prophets in the next slide. But just like we hear all the other prophets, Islam, this is where there's a lot of similarities within Islam and other faiths and other traditions. In the same exact way, as Muslims, we have to also believe that there is something called the day of judgment, or the day where everyone will be held accountable for their actions. Because as Muslims, we believe that this world is only a temporary life, and that everything that we do in this life, he will be held accountable for their actions. If they did good, they'll be compensated. If they did wrong, the results are similar to based on their actions. Also, as Muslims, we believe in divine decree. And finally, we believe in resurrection, that this life is not the only life. Rather, there is something after this life. Once a person is buried, there starts another life. Now, from a belief perspective, this is what I just shared with you. However, from an action perspective, as Muslims, there is something called the 5 pillars of Islam. The 5 pillars of Islam consist of believing in the oneness of God. The second is the establishment of prayer 5 times a day, which takes place in the morning. This is at the break of dawn. The second prayer takes place after the sun has moved from its midday position or the zenith position, and then the third one will take place late in the afternoon. The fourth one will take place immediately after sunset. And the fifth one will take place around an hour to an hour and a half to 2 hours after the prayer of sunset. Also, one of the pillars of Islam is that one must give mandatory charity. And that is 2.5% of your accumulated wealth on an annual basis. This is something that every Muslim has to give. The fourth thing is that there comes 1 month during the Islamic lunar calendar year where a person, he has to fast, which means that he must abstain from intimacy, he must abstain from eating or drinking anything from the break of dawn till sunset. And then finally, the pilgrimage, which is mandatory upon every single male and female to be performed once in their lifetime. Now this is the month that, as I referred to earlier, the month that we have just finished was the month of, as we call it, Dhul Hijjah. And Dhul Hijjah is the month of Hajj. There were 2.5 million Muslims who were gathered in one place in Mecca to perform a 5-day pilgrimage. As I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of prophets mentioned in the Quran, likewise in the Bible, and they are mentioned in the Torah. As you can see here, that I have made a list of all these prophets. There are prophets mentioned in the Quran, and similar, they are mentioned in the Bible. You can see that there's a lot of similarities. Many people are under the assumption that Islam is a completely new religion, and it has nothing to do with the other previous religions. However, if you look at it, if you study Islam from a very positive and a very broad angle, you will learn that, and we will learn that there is so many similarities. All the prophets that you see on the right side of the chart, those are the names on the left side of the chart, those are the Arabic forms of them. However, each of them have been mentioned in the Quran. I'm going to just take a few seconds just for you to just observe this. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. In the Quran, there are many prophets that are mentioned. As you saw in the last slide, there are many prophets mentioned in the Quran. However, if you overall look at the Quran, there are 5 prophets that have been mentioned the most in the Quran. As you can see, the very first one is Noah, second one is Abraham, the third one is Moses, and actually, to be just for everyone to know, out of all these 5 prophets, the one who's been mentioned the most in the Quran is actually Moses. You'll find that in the Quran, Moses has been mentioned the most. Then, at the same time, Jesus has been mentioned the most in the Quran, and also the life of Prophet Muhammad has been mentioned. Now, you will see that the life of Prophet Muhammad in itself, some of it has been mentioned in the Quran. However, more information regarding Prophet Muhammad, his sayings, his actions, can be found in a text or literature which we in Islam we call as hadith, which is called prophetic traditions. And those prophetic traditions, they are compiled in books, and that is where we can find more information regarding regarding the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Now, the next thing is that who was Abraham himself? Because this is what we're talking about here, right? We're here to learn about Abraham. So first of all is that the name of Abraham, the meaning of Abraham, according to some scriptures and according to many texts, it has a meaning of the father of many nations. The father of many nations. And of course you will see that Roman Catholics, whenever they begin their prayer, then generally they will use the name of Abraham and they will call out to him the father of faith. So you will see that when it comes to Abraham, which I will come to later on, he is a figure that is wholeheartedly accepted in Islam, in Judaism, and in Christianity. Also, when you will see that there's a similarity between Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, is that Abraham has been called the friend of God. This is something that is also a similarity with all of them. You will see, as you can see up here, that the first reference I have given is from the Torah, which is, you Israel, my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, the offspring of Abraham, my friend. So you will see that in the Torah, the mention of Abraham, the friend of God, has been mentioned. You will see that in the Bible, you will see that there is a reference of Abraham being the friend of God. As you can see, the scripture was fulfilled, which says, Abraham believed God, and it was reckoned to him as righteousness, and he was called the friend of God. And once again, just like in the Bible and the Torah, you'll find that in the Quran there is a reference. Allah says in the Quran, وَاتَّخَذَ اللَّهُ إِبْرَاهِيمَ خَلِيلًا, that Ibrahim is the friend of God. So once again, this should give you an idea, or this will give you an understanding, that when it comes to these prophets, and when it comes to a lot of information regarding Abraham, there's a lot of similarities in Islam, Judaism, and in Christianity. Also, I want to share with you the parents of Abraham. The parents of Abraham, according to Islamic scriptures, is mentioned that he came from a family that, especially a father who was an idol worshiper. And not only that, but he used to also carve out and sell idols, and this was considered his profession and his primary source of income. He had a business where he would carve out idols and he would sell this. However, you will see that later on, I will share with you that one of the legacies of Abraham was that the time of Abraham was the end of idolatry. And that means that once the time of Abraham came, that is where worshiping idols came to an end. However, you see that today there are many people who do still worship idols, but that came later on into other religions. However, what we know from Abraham is that he was the end at his time, and he was sent from God to come and explain people that idolatry was not the right way. Now, when we talk about Abraham, of course we have to talk about his family. And this is one of the major differences in regards to Islam, Judaism, and in Christianity. When we talk about Sarah and Hagar, which is Sarah and Hajra alayhi salam. Of course we learn, and this is something that is a similarity, which is that in the early days, of course Abraham was not able to have any children with Sarah. So what happened was that they, not for this reason, but they were traveling, they were living in Canaan, they traveled to Egypt, and over there, the king of Egypt, he gave, and there's a long story which I don't want to mention right now due to time, but in Egypt, a woman was given as a bondswoman to Sarah, and her name was Hagar. She was brought back with Abraham back to Canaan, and that is where they began to settle. Now, if you study history, we will learn that that is where Abraham, he had a child, and Hagar gave birth to a child by the name of Ismail or Ishmael. And they were living still in Canaan. However, later on, due to the order and the command of God, according to Islamic scriptures, Hagar and her son Ishmael, along with Abraham, they moved and they settled in Mecca. Abraham took Hagar and took his son Ishmael, and he left them in a desert. This is what has been mentioned in the Bible also, that they were left in a desert. This is what has also been mentioned in the Quran also, that they were left in a place, as the Quran mentions, that there is no place of agriculture, no place where there is any source of life. In a desert, also mentioned in the Quran. However, according to Islamic scriptures, we believe that that desert was the desert of Mecca. This is where they were left. However, if you go into the next slide, we will learn that when it comes to Ishmael and Isaac, there is something that we can learn. For example, we see that Hagar, of course, gave birth to Ishmael, and Prophet Muhammad came from the lineage of Ishmael. And at the same time, on the other side, Sarah later on gave birth to Isaac. From Isaac came the lineage of the people of Israel. And according to also Islamic scriptures, which we'll find in the Bible, that Jesus was then sent to the children of Israel. And from Jesus came what? According to even Islam, we believe that God and Allah gave Jesus, Isa alayhi salam, the Bible, and that is where Christianity started from. So this is something that, the reason I mention this is because this gives us a clear picture that where did Muhammad, peace be upon him, where did he come from? Where did Judaism come from? Where did Christianity come from? Now, in the next slide, we will learn also that in regards to Ishmael and Isaac, that there is, and this is where there's a major difference. There is a major difference. There are some similarities, but the major difference comes when we talk about Sarah and Hagar. According to Islamic beliefs, we believe that Hagar was married to Prophet Abraham rather than her just being simply a bondwoman. According to the Bible, according to Judaic faith, we learn that she was not married to Abraham, rather she was only a slave. She was a slave of Prophet Abraham. Now, what happens is that when this discussion comes up, and then because we know based on the previous slide that Muhammad, peace be upon him, which is Islam, came from Ishmael. That's why you will see that a lot of times people have, when they look at Islam overall, they believe that Islam actually comes from as of course they come from Hagar and Ishmael. Since Hagar was a slave, that's why they look down upon Muslims. However, because that's why according to Islamic faith, Hagar was not simply a slave, rather she was free, she was married, and she was another wife of Prophet Abraham. And when Ishmael was born, and when they were settled in Mecca, that's why I gave a reference here that even God mentions that as you can see in the Bible, there is a verse in reference here from the book of Genesis that even from Ishmael there will be actually it says Isaac over here, here is mentioned over here that this is where they were settled. This is where they were settled. However, at the same time, we see that in the Quran, based on the ayat and the verses that were mentioned earlier, it actually mentions that from this there will be a nation that will come, and that was the prayer of Prophet Abraham in the last verse that was recited earlier. That, oh God, send within these people a prophet who will read upon them the verses of the book of God, and he will purify them, and he will teach them wisdom. So we see that when it comes to Ishmael and Isaac, that's where the major difference comes. Of course, even when it comes to the dream of Abraham, and when he took his son to go and sacrifice him for God, who was that son? Of course, as Muslims, we believe it was Ishmael. And according to the Judaic faith, and according to the scriptures, and according to the Bible, we learned that it was Isaac, and this is where the major difference comes. Besides that, you will see that there's a lot of other similarities. The next thing to mention about is Mecca. Because when we talk about the desert where they were left, this desert, which was called Mecca, has been also, there's reference of this in the Torah, and there's also reference of this in the Bible. It is not called Mecca, but rather it was called Baca. As you can see, B-A-C-A. This is where, as Muslims, we believe that this is where Hagar was left along with her son. And Hagar, and I'm going to give you pictures to explain exactly what I'm trying to say here. Hagar, she was left in the desert, and in search of water, she saw that there were two small elevated places, which were hills, and she ran between them 7 times in search of anyone, in search of help, and in search of water, because she and her son were left in this desert. Now, once again, they were left in the desert due to the command of God. At the same time, we'll also learn that while Ishmael was lying there and he was crying, he began to strike his feet on the ground, and that is from where he created the well of Zamzam. Now this well of Zamzam is still existing till today in Mecca, and thousands of pilgrims, millions of pilgrims who go there, they bring water from there, which is considered as the holy water. At the same time, I want to share with you also that Abraham, based on the verses that were recited earlier, Abraham, he came back later on to visit his family, to visit his wife, to visit his child, and this is where he constructed the black box that some of you may have seen when pilgrims, Muslim pilgrims, they go and they perform their pilgrimage. The main central point of all this is something called the Kaaba, which many people, they refer to it as the black box. And this black box was constructed by Abraham with the help of his son, and the Quran talks about this, that they would pick up stones and they would support one another and they build this place. As time went on, it was a desert, but because water attracts life. Water is life. And so therefore, because in a desert now water is being supplied, people began to reside in that area. And as people began to come, this society and community continued to grow and expand month by month and year by year. The next thing is that Mecca is also mentioned, as I mentioned earlier, that is mentioned in the Holy Scriptures also. You will see that it's called the Valley of Baca, which is mentioned in the Psalms. Also, you will see that in the book of Genesis, as you can see here, I'll read out the verse to you. But God also talks about this place, and He says, God heard the cry of the boy, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven, and said to her, what troubles you, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heeded the cry of the boy where he is. Come, lift the boy and hold him by the hand, for I will make a great nation of him. Talking once again about Ishmael. Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. Once again, the water and the well of Zamzam. She went and she filled the skin with water and let the boy drink. So once again, as I said earlier, there are many, many verses in the Bible that is in reference to what we find over there, and also very similar to the teachings of the Quran. The next one is that, as I mentioned earlier, that we came across a month where Muslims, 2.5 million Muslims, they gathered to perform something which is called, in English it is called the pilgrimage, but in Arabic terms it is called the Hajj. And that is that basically there are 5 days within this one, the last month of the lunar calendar. There are 5 days where 2.5 million Muslims, they gather and they perform a certain amount of rites which they imitate and they commemorate the actions of Hagar and also the actions of Abraham. And also within these 5 days, there is a day which is called the Day of Festival. This is the day where Muslims around the entire world, they sacrifice a sheep, a cow, a ram, a goat, and even sometimes you will go to some other countries, Islamic countries, sometimes they are sacrificing even camels. But all this is to revive and to imitate the actions of Prophet Abraham. This is actually, according to Islamic faith, there's only 2 main holidays. One is the very first day after the month of fasting, the month of Ramadan, and then this is the second holiday in which we remember Prophet Abraham and him taking his son and about to sacrifice him, but before he could sacrifice him, God replaces his son with a sheep or a ram, and he sacrifices him instead of his son, and this is something that we do every single year. And this is something that as Muslims we go around, you will see that within our Muslim communities, we go around to different slaughterhouses and Muslims are performing this act to revive the actions of Abraham. Now, having said all of that, the next thing is that what is the overall legacy of Abraham? The overall legacy of Abraham is that he was the father of monotheistic faiths. And of course, as I said earlier, he came to end idolatry. When you see the topic of Abraham, when you say the topic of Abraham, he is that one main central figure that everyone, they surround the entire interfaith dialogue regarding Abraham. That's why there's a book at home which I've read, is called The Abrahamic Connection. The Abrahamic Connection, and it is a dialogue that takes place between a rabbi, a priest, and a Muslim scholar, an imam, where they have a dialogue, and their entire dialogue is revolving around the subject of Abraham. So that's why when you look at, because based on the chart that I showed you earlier, there are many prophets that are mentioned in the Quran, in the Bible, but at the same time there are many prophets that are considered as prophets in Christianity and in Islam, but they're not considered as prophets according to the Judaic faith. So that's why you will see that when it comes to Abraham, there is no doubt. Everyone has the utmost respect for Abraham. At the same time, the last thing that we learn regarding, and this is considered as a legacy of Abraham, is that Abraham always, he put himself forward before anything else. He actually put God before himself. He put God before himself and everything that he did. And that's why you will see that in the Quran, God mentions, وَإِذِ ابْتَلَىٰ إِبْرَاهِيمَ رَبُّهُ بِكَلِمَاتٍ فَأَتَمَّهُنْ. God mentions that we tested, we challenged Abraham in different forms, in different ways, and yet he passed every single challenge. He passed every single test that we threw his way, and that's why God then mentions that he will be a leader for his people. So that's why this is, this was the theme of the program, and that's why I left this to the end, that what is the legacy of Abraham? So that's why there's so much that we can learn from Abraham, but now I would like to go to some pictures that I would like to share with you that in regards to the Islamic faith, and just to give you an idea about what we have covered. This picture, as you can see, is a sky view of Mecca in itself. This is, as Muslims, we believe that black box, and I'm going to show you a picture of from later on, but this entire place is now developed, but as you can see that this place is packed throughout the entire year. It's always, there's people from around the entire world, they come, they visit this place. Right now, this is a very busy time. As you can see, all the lights are on everywhere, and all the white that you can see around, and you see, you can see some, some black, some white. Those are all people. Those are all people that have come from around the entire world. So this is a picture from the top, and I wanted to also share with you that as you can see, you can see all of this, but you see that one line, the one white line all the way on the side. That is where we believe that Hagar, she ran 7 times between the hills. And that's why every single person, this running of Hagar was so beloved to God that God mentions, and even the Prophet Muhammad mentions, that any person who goes to perform a pilgrimage, their pilgrimage will not be complete. It will remain invalid if the people, they do not run, if a person does not run between the 2 hills, or they do not walk between the 2 hills to imitate Hagar, then their pilgrimage is not complete. That's how much this Muslims and Islam, we take this so important, and we try every single time. Anyone who goes there, they run between this. I'm going to show you some pictures inside also. The next picture. This is during the daytime. It's even more people, as you can see. All that white, even on the outside. That, as you can see, the one is the main central mosque, and this is the biggest mosque according to Islam, based on Islamic history, and even currently today. And all the white outside, people are praying there. Even here, on that side, even on that side, which we cannot even see, but there's so much space for everyone to pray to the Kaaba. This is the black box up front. As you can see, this is according to based on the teaching of the Quran, in the prophetic traditions, Abraham built this along with his son Ishmael. And as you can see, now this black box in itself was not this tall the way Prophet Abraham he built it. Of course, it went through a lot of changes. Based on Islamic history, it was quite low because, of course, they cannot reach so high. But later on, as time went on, there have been mentions in Islamic history that there were some floods that came along. And actually, just for everyone to know, you can see all the way in this corner here. You see this gold structure, this small, this glass with the gold small dome. This is actually, there is inside there, there is a rock which has a footprint of Prophet Abraham. And we believe that Abraham, he stood upon this rock to build this. Now the question that may come to your mind is that how is he going to be standing up here and building something that is far away from there? That is far from where he was standing. So actually, based on Islamic history, what we learn is that he stood upon this, and this black box, the Kaaba, was very close. Was very, very close. But as time went on, there was a flood that came here in Mecca, and this entire structure, the black box, was shifted. It was shifted it was shifted further away, and that is where it was settled. So now you will see that as people, they are circulating. Every single time people, they go there, they circulate this black box because it is an act of worship. And then you will see that they come, and then based on the tradition of the Prophet Muhammad, he will come and he will pray. He will pray 2 units of prayer behind this footprint of Prophet Abraham. So once again, if you go there, you will see. The next one. Once again, here, this is a better idea. This is all a big, huge courtyard. It's very, very open. There is no roof to all of this. You will see that these are all pilgrims, but this is nothing compared to the main primary time of the pilgrimage. These are just few people who are probably living there in Mecca, or some visitors from out of town or from other countries. And this is during the daytime, of course. But you will see that what people are doing is that between the